Do you know how healthy your spiritual heart is?
Welcome to the Midweek Motivation Podcast, where we bring practical help for your faith and life. Here's today's episode.
Sunday, Pastor Gabe shared a message about how to tame our tongue, but he finished that up with this idea that comes from Matthew about the fact that the words that come out of our mouths actually stem from what is in our heart. And so our heart health is such a huge and important thing when it comes to every facet of our lives. So I did a little bit of research about this, and I researched a healthy heart and why it's so important in our physical body. And I think that there is a consensus that if we don't keep our physical hearts healthy, then we're in trouble, right? Like we're gonna experience some impact in that. Well, did you know that your spiritual heart can have the same impact? So in my research, I read this. A healthy heart is central to overall good health because it's the muscle at the center of your body's circulatory system that pumps blood to every organ, supplying oxygen and nutrients and removing waste. If your heart isn't functioning properly, your organs won't receive the oxygen and nutrients they need, which can greatly affect their function and even lead to death. Well, I did some research about our spiritual health in the Bible, and the Easton's Bible Dictionary says that according to the Bible, the heart is the center. Not only our spiritual heart is the center to not only our spiritual activity, but of all the operations of human life. So if we were to compare those two, the operations of human life might be like our organs, right? Might be the way that your family operates, the way that your work operates, the way that people are encouraged by your words. And so I wanted to take a second to think back myself on some times when maybe I've seen success in this areas and sometimes not. And I have this picture in my head of a valve that really like directs the flow of what it is that enters my heart. And like sometimes that valve is pointed in the right direction and it's letting God through, and that's what's pumping through me. And sometimes it's not. And it makes me think of my kids. Oh my gosh, my kids are a hot button for me sometimes. When I feel like something is not going right for them and mama bear switch flips for me, I can really be operating out of a space that is not doesn't represent God flowing through me. And I've had a couple of conversations with some people that really reflect that I look back on now and I'm like, gosh, I really didn't do that very well. And that's just because I love my kids so much. But in actuality, when I'm operating from the space that God wants me to, the words that come out of my mouth in those situations, there's just an automatic thing that happens that glorifies God and actually really benefits that situation instead of making it worse. So when I think about this from the Bible, I think about Paul. And you might be familiar with Paul. He is someone who wrote the majority of the letters in the New Testament and used his words so much for encouragement and for lifting up and building the church. But it didn't start out that way for him. And when we look at him and we're introduced to him in Acts chapter 8, he actually is not doing well. He's actually not using his words or his actions to build up others. He is doing the exact opposite of that. And so I can definitely relate to that. All right, so in chapter 8 of Acts, verse 1 says, Saul was one of the witnesses, and he agreed completely with killing Stephen. So his actions actually caused death instead of life. That's Acts of the Apostles 8, verse 1. If we switch over to chapter 9, we see Saul actually meet Jesus, and he finds this space where he actually connects to Jesus and what Jesus is all about, really. And it makes a world of difference in the way that he interacts with people and in the service. So when I think about this for myself in my own life, I actually can go back and see maybe a little bit of a parallel in the Bible with the person who was Saul, but that we mostly know as Paul. If we read the letters in the Old Testament or in the New Testament, there are so many of those letters written by Paul, who ended up becoming the encourager and the uplifter and the teacher of a lot of the church in the New Testament after Jesus came. And man, when we meet Paul for the first time, he's Saul, and we meet him in Acts chapter 8. And he was actually very, very zealous. The Bible uses that word when it came to chasing after these people that followed Jesus, because he felt like he was honoring God, and he felt like he thought that he was plugged into the right thing.
Hey, just jumping in right in the middle of this podcast episode to tell you about a resource that you need in your life. You know, if you feel ever stuck in your faith, or if you feel like, I want to grow my faith, but I just don't quite know what the steps are, we got a resource for you called Sticky Faith in a Slippery World. I mean, this world is changing and it's crazy, and we all need something firm to stand on. And I wrote a book for you called Sticky Faith in a Slippery World. You can get your copy right now at the link in the description.
Because he felt like he was plugged into the right thing, he was full on, hardcore, doing what he thought that he was supposed to be doing. Wasn't the right thing. But then we flip over a page to chapter 9, and we see Paul meet Jesus for the first time, and he's completely transformed. And he gets plugged into this new thing, Jesus, and he ends up becoming a force to be reckoned with for Jesus. And you can read all of the letters in the New Testament, but there is one particular point in Galatians 1 that Paul actually recalls his own experience in this. He says in chapter 11, he says, "Dear brothers and sisters, I want you to understand that the gospel message I preach is not based on mere human reasoning." Man, that's huge. He says, "I received my message from no human source, and no one taught me. Instead, I received it by direct revelation from Jesus. You know what I was like when I followed the Jewish religion, how I violently persecuted God's church. I did my best to destroy it. I was far ahead of my fellow Jews in my zeal for the traditions of my ancestors." And he goes on to talk more about how God called him through Jesus to be a positive influence in his church and to build up Jesus's church. And it's incredible what he ends up doing. So this brings to mind thoughts on how it is that we can build up and maintain a healthy spiritual heart, because we can see that not healthy spiritual heart really just causes disaster, right? It can lead to death. You can get a spiritual heart attack if you're not really careful about this. Yeah, the impact of that's pretty huge. But how healthy would all of the operations of your life be if your heart was actually healthy? And what does it take to create a healthy spiritual heart? I think from the example that we see here with Paul, that understanding that we need to start with what's pumping through our heart is a huge thing. It's number one, probably. And I think that if you look back at Pastor Gabe's message on Sunday, you'll get that same message, that we need to know what it is that's pumping through our heart. And I go back to that valve, right? I think that there's it's kind of like a waterway almost. Like we can get to control what it is that is pumping through us, in the sense that once we accept Jesus into our heart, he's with us, but we're still fighting with our human nature. So you can grab onto that valve and say, hey, is it pointed in the right direction? Am I letting the Spirit of God flow through me? Or, I'm having a bad day. Like, is that valve pointed in the wrong direction? And am I working out of, or speaking out of, or acting out of my anger, or out of insecurities, or whatever it might be? That's a huge question to ask. And so that's number one. Number one is, am I paying attention to what it is that's flowing through me in the moment? Number two, are you checking your numbers? Just like with our physical heart requires that we check our numbers. We know what our blood pressure is. We check our cholesterol, and all of those things help us to determine how healthy our heart actually is. And so I would suggest that you do that with your spiritual heart as well. Are you checking your spiritual heart blood pressure? What's pumping through you? Are you checking your cholesterol? Do you have some stuff that's in there clogging stuff up? Maybe it's something that you need to heal from. Maybe it's a forgiveness that you need to work out. Maybe it's maybe you're taking in something on TV or on social media that's clogging up that flow of the Spirit through you. And if that's the case, then maybe it's time to start dieting on something different. Maybe it's time to start filling up your mind and your heart with something of more benefit. The Bible says that we should be focused on the things that are good, and we should be paying attention to and filling up our heart and our minds with those types of things. Is that what is happening in your life right now? I can tell you that I struggle with this, making sure that I'm watching the right things, making sure I'm listening to the right things. And it's a real benefit to be able to focus in on those things and cut out the stuff, the trans fat of your spiritual heart. Cut it out. It's gross. All right. Number 3, be aware of the symptoms. When we do research on things like health heart, which I'm sure at some point in time you've done, there are very, very specific cues that we can lean into to know whether or not our heart is in trouble. And it can be anything from I'm having a hard time exercising and breathing, right? All the way to I'm feeling some pain. It's an emergency moment and it's time to call 911. Know the symptoms of what a heart in trouble looks like for your spiritual heart. And those symptoms might be a relationship that's not working. Maybe it's is your home functioning the way that it should be? Are you having interactions with your spouse or with your kids that are healthy and that are productive? Is your relationships at work going well? How is your mindset as far as gratitude? Are you struggling with some things in those areas? Those are all really, really great tip-offs to figure out that it's time to check the health of your spiritual heart. I hope that this has been a big help to you and that you're able to get a great workout for your spiritual heart and get that nice and healthy. And don't forget to check out the message from Sunday. It's going to be a big help.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Midweek Motivation. To make sure you don't miss any content in the future, please subscribe, share, and if you enjoyed this, give us a like, and consider popping by a Westside service some weekend. You can find out more at westsidecommunitychurch.com.